I'm writing this from a motel room in Salina, Kansas, 62 miles from the branch shelter. Tomorrow morning I'm going to drive out there, walk down 3 flights of poured concrete stairs, and I don't think I'm coming back up. I want to be clear about something: nothing down there is going to hurt me. Nothing chased me. Nothing whispered my name from a dark corridor. There is no monster in this story. That's the problem. That's the whole problem. If there were a monster, I could be afraid of it, and fear is the kind of thing a man can use. What I've got instead is a pull, low and steady, like water finding a drain, and I have not been able to think my way around it for 19 days. I fix generators. Diesel, natural gas, propane, the big 3-phase commercial units and the little residential standby boxes that kick on when the grid drops. I've been doing it for 22 years. In that time I've worked in hospitals, data centers, hog confinements, a casino outside Wichita, 2 state prisons, and an indoor marijuana grow in a warehouse near Topeka that I probably shouldn't mention. The point is, I've spent a lot of hours in mechanical rooms, and not one of them was ever hard to leave. A generator room is loud, it's hot, it smells like exhaust and diesel, and when the job's done you pack your tools and go. That's how it works. That's how it's supposed to work. The call came through my service company on a Tuesday in March. Client was a trust, the Brandt Family Preservation Trust, and they needed a technician to perform generator maintenance at a private shelter installation in Ellsworth County. 2 units, possibly 3, running rough. Occupants on site. Estimated 2-day job. The pay was good. $1,300 a day plus fuel, which for a 2-day rural call is about 40% above market. I didn't think much of it. Rich people who build bunkers tend to overpay for everything. They want the best, and they think the best costs more, and most of the time they're right enough that it doesn't matter. I drove out on a Thursday. Ellsworth County is flat the way only central Kansas can be flat, wheat stubble to the horizon in every direction, the sky so wide it makes you feel observed. The GPS took me down a state highway, then a county road, then a dirt track that ran between 2 fallow fields toward a cluster of outbuildings that hadn't been painted since Reagan. There was a barn, mostly collapsed. A machine shed. A house set back from the road, windows dark, porch sagging. The whole property looked abandoned. A man was waiting for me by the machine shed. Young, maybe 30, wearing a coat that was too nice for the setting. He introduced himself as Nathan Prull, attorney for the trust, and shook my hand with the careful grip of someone who'd been taught to shake hands but didn't do it often enough to be comfortable with it. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Thanks for coming out," he said. "I know it's remote." I told him remote was fine. Remote was most of my work. He walked me behind the collapsed barn to a concrete pad maybe 20 feet square, set flush with the ground and stained with 50 years of weather. In the center was a blast door, not military grade, but heavy, a custom pour with a steel core and a wheel lock like you'd see on a ship hatch. It was open. Below it, a square of fluorescent light and the top of a staircase. The shelter was built in 1962, Prull said, reading from notes on his phone. Gerhard Brandt. He was a farmer, but before that he was, it says here, acoustical engineer. He designed concert halls, recording studios. He built this himself, or supervised the build anyway. The trust maintains it. Fuel deliveries, structural inspections, that sort of thing. I asked him about the occupants. He shifted his weight. 6 people. They moved in about 6 weeks ago during the chemical scare. You heard about the Kannapolis derailment? I had. A freight train carrying industrial solvents had derailed near Kannapolis in February. There'd been an evacuation order for a 10-mile radius. It lasted 4 days. The EPA cleared the area within a week. They went in during the evacuation, Prull said. Which was fine, that's what the shelter is for. But when the all-clear came, they didn't come out. Why not? They believe the contamination is still present. They have monitoring equipment down there. It's showing elevated readings. Is the contamination still present? No, he said. Then, more carefully, not according to the EPA, the county health department, or any of the independent testing that's been done. But their equipment says otherwise, and they trust their equipment. I asked if anyone had tried to get them out. He said the trust had no legal standing to evict them. They'd paid for occupancy rights under the trust's charter, which Gerhard Brandt had written to guarantee shelter access to anyone who needed it. As long as they were paying and not damaging the property, the trust's only obligation was maintenance. So I'm maintenance, I said. Your maintenance, he confirmed. He handed me a manila envelope with the shelter's mechanical drawings and electrical schematics, thanked me again, and drove away in a car that was cleaner than anything else in the county. I got my tools from the truck and went down. The staircase was poured concrete, wide enough for 2 people, with a steel handrail bolted to the wall. The fluorescent lights were the old tube kind, humming at 60 Hz, and they lit the stairs in that flat, shadowless way that makes everything look like a photograph of itself. The air changed as I descended. Surface air in Kansas in March is dry, sharp, smells like cold dirt and whatever the wind's been dragging across the plains. By the second landing, it was different. Warmer. Denser. It had a quality I didn't have a word for at the time. I'd call it managed. It didn't smell like anything. It was air that had been passed through filters and circulators until every trace of origin had been scrubbed out of it, and what was left was just air. Pure function, no character. The stairs ended at a second door, this one standing open, and beyond it was the shelter. It was bigger than I expected. The schematics Prul had given me showed 3 levels. Level 1 was the living space, a common room, a kitchen, for sleeping rooms, a bathroom with actual plumbing, a storage area. Level 2 was utilities and supplies, water tanks, food storage, medical supplies, the air handling system. Level 3 was the generator room. The ceilings were 8 feet, the walls unpainted concrete, the floors poured with a light aggregate that gave them a faint sparkle under the lights. Everything was clean. Not sterile, not obsessive, but clean the way a well-run kitchen is clean, the kind of clean that comes from people who have routines and keep them. A man met me at the bottom of the stairs. Mid-50s, thick through the chest, gray hair trimmed short. He was wearing a flannel shirt and work pants, and he looked like he could have been any farmer in any diner in any town within 100 miles. "You the generator man?" he said. I said I was. "Dale Weston." He shook my hand. His grip was firm and unperformed. "Appreciate you coming. We've been hearing a knock in Unit 2 for about 10 days. And Unit 1's been surging, lights flicker every couple hours." I told him I'd take a look. He nodded and led me into the common room. The others were there. Irene, Dale's wife, was at the kitchen counter cutting vegetables. She was small and sharp-featured, and she smiled at me the way you smile at a plumber, grateful but not interested in conversation. Meg, their daughter, was sitting on a couch reading a paperback. She was maybe 28, dark-haired, and she looked up when I came in with an expression I couldn't read. Not suspicious. Not welcoming. Something between assessment and recognition, like she'd been expecting someone and was checking if I was the right one. Carlos, Meg's husband, was pacing near the far wall. He was lean, tense, younger than Meg by a few years. He nodded at me and said, "You came from outside?" I said I had. He said, "How is it out there?" and I could tell from the way he asked that it wasn't a casual question. "It's fine," I said. "Cold. Windy. Normal." Carlos looked at Meg. Meg looked at her book. There were 2 others. Lyle was a neighbor, 60s, retired, mostly silent. And Travis. Travis was harder to place. Mid-30s, maybe. Thin, clean-shaven, with pale eyes that settled on things slowly. Dale introduced him as a friend, but there was a pause before the word that suggested the friendship was recent and the origins were vague. Travis shook my hand and smiled, and his smile was the most contented expression I'd ever seen on a human face. "Welcome," Travis said. "Just that. Welcome." Irene offered me coffee. It was good. I drank it standing in the common room while Dale walked me through the setup. 3 diesel generator units on level 3, each one a 30 kilowatt Cummins, installed in 1962 and retrofitted twice since. They fed a main bus panel that distributed power to lighting, ventilation, water pumps, the kitchen's electric range, and what Dale called the monitoring station, a bank of instruments on level 1 that tracked exterior radiation levels, air particulates, and chemical concentrations. "I want to show you the readings," Dale said, and led me to the monitoring station. It was a built-in console against the wall of the common room, professional grade, with digital displays and a paper chart recorder that was still rolling. The displays showed numbers for gamma radiation, airborne particulate density, VOC concentrations, and a few other metrics I recognized from industrial hygiene work. Every reading was elevated. Not catastrophically, not "you're dying right now" elevated, but consistently above what you'd want for long-term habitation. According to these instruments, the air on the surface was not safe to breathe for extended periods. "These were installed about 12 years ago," Dale said. "Replaced the original equipment. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. These are research-grade sensors." I asked him if it was possible the sensors were miscalibrated. "Absolutely possible," he said. He said it like a man who'd considered the question 100 times. "I was a mechanical engineer for 30 years, I know instruments drift. But I've run the internal diagnostics, and they self-calibrate against sealed reference samples. The reference samples could be compromised, I grant you that. But I'd need to take them to a lab to verify, and that means going outside, and if the readings are accurate, extended surface exposure is exactly what I'm trying to avoid." It was a perfect circle. He couldn't verify the instruments without going outside. He wouldn't go outside until the instruments were verified. And inside the circle, 6 people lived in a concrete box under a Kansas wheat field, waiting for numbers to change. "I'd love to be wrong," Dale said. He meant it. I could hear it. "But I'm not going to bet my family's lungs on it." Carlos, who'd been listening from across the room, said nothing. But his jaw was set in a way that told me this conversation had happened before, many times, and it always ended the same way. I went to level 3 to look at the generators. The stairway to the lower levels was narrower than the main entrance stairs, and the walls were closer together, and the hum got louder as I descended. Not unpleasant. It was a deep, even vibration that I could feel in my molars and the bones of my wrists. 3 diesel engines running in an enclosed concrete space will produce a lot of low-frequency sound, and the standing waves in a rectangular room can amplify certain frequencies until you're not so much hearing them as wearing them. The generator room was large, maybe 30 by 40 feet, with a 12-foot ceiling to accommodate the exhaust systems. The 3 Cummins units were lined up along the back wall, bolted to concrete pads, each one the size of a compact car. Units 1 and 3 were running. Unit 2 was running but rough. I could hear the knock Dale had mentioned, a sharp metallic tick on every third rotation. Classic injector timing issue. I set up my tools and went to work. The injector issue on Unit 2 took about 3 hours. Straightforward, just fiddly. The fuel rail on these older Cummins engines is a pain to access without pulling the valve cover, and the bolts were corroded. The surging on Unit 1 was a partially clogged fuel filter, which I replaced from the shelter's own spare parts inventory. Someone had been keeping this place stocked. The spare parts were organized, labeled, and current. Whoever maintained this shelter took it seriously. While I worked, I noticed something that bothered me. The 3 generators, at full output, could produce 90 kilowatts. The shelter's electrical load, lighting, ventilation, water pumps, kitchen, monitoring station, should have topped out at maybe 35, 40 kilowatts. But all 3 units were running, and they were running at about 70% capacity. That meant the shelter was drawing roughly 63 kilowatts of power. 20 plus kilowatts were going somewhere that wasn't on the electrical drawings Proul had given me. I traced the main bus panel. The circuits matched the schematics for levels 1 and 2. But there was a fourth conduit leaving the panel, a heavy gauge run, for /0 copper, headed into the wall toward what should have been solid earth. It wasn't on the drawings. I followed the conduit to the wall. It entered a junction box, and from there it ran through a penetration in the concrete into a space beyond. I put my ear to the wall. Behind the generator noise, I could feel something, a vibration that wasn't the engines. Lower. Slower. Rhythmic in a way that diesel combustion isn't. Diesel engines fire in patterns determined by cylinder count and RPM. This was different. This was smooth, continuous, like a single sustained note. I went upstairs and asked Dale about it. "There are rooms on level 3 that we can't access," he said. "They were locked when we arrived. Heavy padlocks, not original hardware. The trust didn't give us keys." "Have you tried to get in?" "No," Dale said. "We're guests here. The trust has rules about the property, and we follow them." I asked what the rules were. Dale showed me a laminated sheet posted on the wall near the entrance. It was typed, not handwritten, and formatted like a building code notice. Branch shelter, occupancy guidelines. Most of them were practical. Water rationing procedures. Generator maintenance schedule, weekly checks, oil change every 500 hours. Food rotation protocol. Waste management. One of them, near the bottom, read, "Level 3 restricted rooms are to remain secured. Maintenance of restricted systems is performed by trust-authorized personnel only. Do not attempt to access, modify, or disconnect restricted electrical circuits." Trust-authorized personnel, I said. That's me. I'm the maintenance contractor. Dale looked at me for a long moment. "You're authorized for the generators. I don't know that extends to whatever else is down there. If there's an unmonitored electrical load pulling 20 kilowatts through copper that isn't on my schematics, that's a fire hazard. That makes it a generator issue." Dale didn't argue. He also didn't give me permission. He just said, "Do what you think is right," and went back to the common room. That night, they insisted I stay in the shelter. It was late, the drive back to Salina was over an hour, and Irene had made enough stew for 7. They gave me a sleeping room on level 1, small, windowless obviously, with a cot and a wool blanket and a shelf with a few paperback novels that smelled like 1978. The room was plain and close and should have felt like a cell. It didn't. I lay on that cot and the hum of the generators came through the concrete, not loud, not intrusive, just present. A low, constant tone that settled into my chest and stayed there. The temperature was perfect. Not warm, not cool. Exactly the temperature at which your body stops spending energy on thermoregulation and just exists. The air was clean in a way I'd never experienced. No dust, no pollen, no chemical traces, no weather. Just air. The kind of air your lungs were designed for and have never actually gotten. I slept 7 hours without waking. I hadn't done that in 4 years. Not since Karen left and the house got quiet in the wrong way and I started keeping the TV on all night just to have something that wasn't silence. Down here, the hum was better than television. It was better than noise. It was the sound of a system that was working perfectly, and if you let yourself listen to it, your body believed it. Your shoulders dropped. Your jaw unclenched. Your breathing slowed to a rate that felt ceremonial. When I woke up, I felt good. Not groggy good, not caffeine good. Clean good. Like I'd been reset to factory settings. I lay there for 10 minutes before I remembered that feeling good in a concrete box 80 feet underground should probably concern me. I got up, splashed water on my face, and went to find coffee. Carlos was in the kitchen. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. "You've got to help me," he said. He kept his voice low. Irene and Dale were in the common room. Travis was somewhere on level 2. Lyle was asleep. "Meg won't leave," Carlos said. "She was ready to leave 3 weeks ago. We had a plan. I was going to drive her to her sister's in Hutchinson. We were going to stay there until the EPA published final results, and that was going to be that. But she changed her mind. Or something changed it for her." "The readings," I said. "The readings are wrong. You know they're wrong. I've been telling her they're wrong for a month. She agrees with me when we talk about it. She says, 'You're probably right,' and then she doesn't move. None of them move. They just stay. What about you?" "I stay because Meg stays." "But I'm not," he stopped. "I don't feel what they feel. Whatever this place does, it doesn't do it to me the same way. Or it hasn't yet. I don't know. I don't sleep well down here. The hum keeps me up." "The hum helps me sleep," I said, and I heard myself say it, and we looked at each other. "Yeah," Carlos said. "That's what Meg said too. First week. After breakfast, I went back to level 3. I told Dale I was going to inspect the restricted electrical run for safety reasons. He nodded. He didn't offer to come with me, and he didn't tell me not to. The neutrality of his response was itself unsettling. A man who'd been a mechanical engineer for 30 years should have an opinion about unauthorized electrical loads. The restricted rooms were at the far end of level 3, past the generator room, through a short corridor that wasn't on the schematics. 2 steel doors, each secured with a heavy commercial padlock. Not the original 1962 hardware, these were modern, high-security locks, installed within the last decade. I cut them with my bolt cutters. The first room was approximately 15 by 20 feet. Along the back wall, floor to ceiling, was a bank of equipment I recognized immediately: speakers. Not consumer speakers, professional transducers, the kind used in acoustical testing labs, designed to produce precise frequencies at controlled amplitudes. They were built into the wall, flush-mounted, sealed behind perforated steel panels. There were 16 of them. They were all active. I pulled out my phone and opened a spectrum analyzer app. The room was saturated with low-frequency sound. The primary tone was 18.9 Hz, just below the threshold of human hearing. Infrasound. At certain amplitudes, 18 to 19 Hz infrasound is associated with feelings of unease, nausea, and the sensation of being watched. At other amplitudes, lower, steadier, more carefully controlled, it produces the opposite. Calm. Comfort. A physiological reduction in cortisol and adrenaline. The kind of deep body relaxation that people spend thousands of dollars trying to achieve through meditation retreats and float tanks and prescription drugs. I understood what I was looking at. Gerhard Brandt, acoustical engineer, had built a concert hall under Kansas. But the audience wasn't listening to music. The audience was living inside the instrument, and the instrument was playing a single, inaudible note, and that note was telling their nervous systems, stay. The equipment was powered by the phantom electrical run I'd traced from the generator panel. 20+ kilowatts, feeding amplifiers and transducers that had been running, according to the hour meter on the main amplifier chassis, for over 53 years. Continuously. Since 1962. Since the day Gerhard Brandt sealed this place and turned it on. I went through the second door. It was a living space. Larger than the sleeping rooms on level 1, but built the same way: cots, shelving, a small desk. Except this room had been occupied many times, by many people, over many years. The evidence was layered like sediment. A wool blanket that was sun-faded despite never seeing sunlight. Paperback novels from the 1970s, spines cracked, stacked neatly on a shelf. A transistor radio from the same era. On the next shelf, newer items, a Walkman, cassette tapes, a digital watch with a dead battery. Then later things, a portable CD player, a few DVDs, a smartphone in a rubber case, its screen dark. On the desk, a spiral notebook. I opened it. The first entry was dated June 1967. The handwriting was careful, precise, and it belonged to someone named Arthur Koss. He was a generator technician. He'd been hired by Gerhard Brandt's estate to perform the first major service on the shelter's generators, 5 years after installation. He'd come for a 2-day job. The entry described the generators, the fuel system, the electrical layout. It was professional, thorough, and entirely normal for the first 4 pages. On the 5th page, the tone changed. I can't explain what happened. I finished the job. I packed my tools. I walked to the stairs. And I couldn't make myself climb them. Not because anything stopped me. Not because I was afraid. I just couldn't think of a reason. My apartment in Topeka has a dripping faucet I've been meaning to fix for 2 years. The truck needs an oil change. I've got a dentist appointment on Friday. And standing at the bottom of those stairs, none of it seemed like enough. Not enough to justify leaving a place where the air is this clean and the temperature is this right and the sound is this good. I know how that reads. I know it's not rational. But rational is what happens in your head, and this is happening somewhere lower than that. He stayed. He stayed for 11 years. The notebook entries continued, growing less frequent, growing calmer. He maintained the generators. He organized the supply rooms. He cataloged the spare parts. He lived in this room, in this silence that wasn't silence, in this sound that wasn't sound. In 1978, the entries stopped. No final entry. No explanation. Just a blank page after the last one, and then nothing. There were other notebooks. Other names. Margaret Prull, 1979. I wondered if she was related to Nathan Prull, the trust lawyer. Dennis Katz, 1984. A woman named Suyun Park, 1991. Each one a generator technician. Each one hired for a short job. Each one stayed. The entries all followed the same arc: confusion, resistance, rationalization, acceptance, silence. Rick Partlow's notebook was the most recent. 2018, his handwriting was sloppy, urgent, different from the others. He'd worked for the same service company I did. I'd met him twice, maybe 3 times, a quiet guy, mid-40s, going through a divorce. He went on a job in Kansas and never came back. The company figured he'd quit. His ex-wife assumed he'd started over somewhere. His first entry read, "The generators are fine. I fixed the fuel pump in 4 hours. I should be on the road by now. I'm not. I don't know why and I don't like it." His last entry, dated 3 weeks after the first, read, "I called Denise today. Told her I was okay. She didn't ask where I was and I didn't tell her. Couldn't think of how to describe it. How do you tell someone you found the only place that feels like it was built for you? She'd think I was crazy. Maybe I am. But the air here doesn't lie, and the air out there does, and I'm done breathing lies." Rick Partlow's cot was still made. His jacket was on the hook. His phone was on the desk, dead. He was here for years. But he wasn't here now. I closed the notebook and sat on the edge of the cot and breathed. The air was perfect. The hum was perfect. The temperature was perfect. I could feel my heart rate, slow and steady and unafraid, and I understood, not intellectually, but in my blood and in my fascia and in the animal architecture of my body, why Arthur Koss couldn't climb the stairs. The place was a hand that fit around you. Not a fist. A hand. Open, warm, and shaped exactly right. I sat there for 4 minutes. Then I picked up my bolt cutters and went to the amplifier rack and started pulling cables. It took about 20 seconds for the infrasound to die. The transducers wound down with a fading thrum I could feel in my teeth, and then they were off, and the room was just a room. Concrete walls. Dead speakers. A cot where a man I'd once shared a coffee break with had lived and vanished. The change hit me like a slap. The air didn't change, it was the same recycled, filtered, temperature-controlled air it had always been. But without the infrasound, my body experienced it differently. Suddenly the room was close. The ceiling was low. The walls were thick, and behind them was dirt, and behind the dirt was more dirt, and I was 80 feet underground in a concrete box that a dead engineer had designed to feel like home, and I needed to get out. I went upstairs fast. The common room was in chaos. Irene was sitting on the floor, hyperventilating. Dale was beside her, looking stricken, gripping her hand. Lyle had pressed himself into a corner of the room and was staring at the ceiling as if he could see through it. Meg was standing in the middle of the room with her hands over her ears. Even though there was nothing to hear, the silence, the sudden absence of the infrasound, was louder than any sound. "What did you do?" Dale said. "I turned it off." "Turned what off?" "The sound system. On level 3. Behind the locked doors. There's a bank of infrasound transducers that have been running since 1962. They generate a frequency that affects the nervous system, reduces stress hormones, promotes feelings of safety and comfort. That's why you don't want to leave. That's why the readings on your monitors look wrong. You're not making rational assessments. Your bodies have been conditioned to interpret this environment as optimal and everything else as threatening." Dale stared at me. I could see him processing it, the engineer in him spinning up, cross-referencing, testing the claim against his own experience. His face went through something I'd call realization, except realization implies surprise, and what I saw was closer to confirmation. He'd suspected. Maybe not this specifically, but he'd known something wasn't right about how right everything felt. "The monitors," he said slowly. "You're saying the monitor readings are wrong. I'm saying you should go outside and see for yourself. The air is fine. It's been fine for weeks." "I know," he said. And the way he said it, quiet, heavy, ashamed, told me he'd known for a while. He'd known the readings were wrong. He'd known the surface was safe. But knowing hadn't been enough. Knowing is what happens in your head, and this was happening somewhere lower than that. Carlos had already moved. He was at the blast door at the top of the stairs, turning the wheel lock. Meg was behind him, not stopping him, not helping. She was watching with the expression of someone who'd just been woken from a sleep she hadn't known she was in. The door opened. Kansas evening. A sky the color of a bruise, orange and purple at the horizon, the first stars coming through in the east. Cold air poured down the stairway like water, real air, unfiltered, full of dust and distance and the smell of frozen wheat stubble. It hit us and Irene made a sound like she'd been held underwater and just broken the surface. Travis didn't move. He was standing in the corridor between the common room and the stairway, and he was looking at me, and he was smiling. The same contented smile he'd had when I arrived. Undiminished. Unaffected. The infrasound was off and Travis hadn't changed. "You should go up," I told him. "Why?" he said. "Because the sound system was manipulating you. All of you. It was making you feel safe so you wouldn't leave." "I know," Travis said. Same words Dale had used, entirely different meaning. Dale's, "I know," was the sound of a lock breaking. Travis's, "I know," was the sound of a door closing. He'd known. He'd always known. He hadn't cared. "I was here before the chemical scare," Travis said. "I came 8 months ago. I was driving through, saw the property listed on a shelter share site, thought I'd check it out for a night or two. That was October. You've been here 8 months. The sound helped at first. But I don't need it anymore." He looked toward the open blast door, toward the rectangle of darkening sky at the top of the stairs. It's loud up there. It's fast and it's loud and nothing fits. Down here, everything fits. You felt it too. Last night. Don't tell me you didn't. I didn't tell him I didn't. Getting the others out took an hour. Irene needed to be walked up the stairs by Dale and Meg on either side of her, one step at a time, talking to her constantly. She kept stopping, not from fear of the surface but from a pull backward that she couldn't articulate. It was like watching someone try to walk against a current that only they could feel. Lyle went up on his own, fast, without looking back, and sat in my truck with the engine running and the heater on and didn't speak. Carlos drove Meg down the dirt track toward the county road. Dale and Irene followed in their own car. Lyle asked me to drive him to the gas station in Ellsworth. I did. He got out, thanked me, and walked away without giving me his last name. I went back for Travis. I don't know why. Professional obligation, maybe. Or something else. He was on level 3. He'd gone into the restricted room and reconnected the amplifier cables. The transducers were humming again. I could feel it from the corridor, that low, sweet pull, the sound of a place that wanted you in it. You can't stay here, I said. I can't stay anywhere else, he said. He was sitting on Rick Partlow's cot, reading one of Arthur Kosa's paperbacks. He looked up at me and his face was calm and final. I'm not sick. I'm not trapped. I know exactly what this room does and I'm choosing it. Do you understand? I'm choosing this. The others who stayed here, the technicians, they're gone. Whatever happened to them? They left, eventually. They all do. The notebook stopped because they stopped writing, not because they stopped living. They went back to the surface when they were ready. Some of them maintained the trust from outside. Some of them just went home. You don't know that. I know the door's unlocked. It's always been unlocked. No one stays because they can't leave. They stay because they don't want to. That's not a trap. That's a preference. I stood there in the corridor and listened to the infrasound, to the sound I couldn't hear but could feel in the spaces between my ribs, and I did not have an argument against what Travis had said. Because he was right. The door was open. It had always been open. No one was locked in. No one was restrained. The shelter didn't force anything. It just made the alternative feel like less. I went upstairs. I closed the blast door. I drove to Salina. I checked into this motel. That was 19 days ago. I've done 3 other jobs since then. A standby generator at a dentist's office in McPherson. A transfer switch at a grain elevator in Lindsborg. A full service on a backup unit at a nursing home in Abilene. Normal work. Good work. The kind of work that used to fill the hours well enough that I didn't notice the hours passing. Now I notice. I notice the noise. Traffic, wind, refrigerators cycling, the neighbor's dog, my own breathing, the surface world is a wall of uncoordinated sound, and my nervous system processes every fragment of it, sorting and discarding and sorting again, burning energy on nothing, a machine running with no load. I notice the temperature. My apartment is either too warm or too cold and the thermostat is a negotiation I never win. I notice the air. Dust. Exhaust. Pollen. The particulate presence of 7 billion people and their machinery sharing an atmosphere that hasn't been managed by anything smarter than wind patterns. I drove to Ellsworth last week. I told myself I was going to check on Travis. Make sure he was eating, make sure the generators were holding. Professional follow-up. I parked by the machine shed and sat in my truck for 40 minutes. I could see the concrete pad. The blast door was closed. I didn't go down. I drove back to Salina and sat in the motel parking lot and called my daughter. Emma's 14. She lives with Karen in Lawrence. I see her 2 weekends a month when I'm not on a job. She told me about a school project and a friend who was being dramatic in a song she liked, and I listened to her voice and tried to make it mean enough. Tried to make it outweigh the memory of clean air and perfect temperature and a sound that told my body everything was going to be fine. It almost worked. I called Nathan Prohl yesterday. I told him the generators were running well but should be checked again in 6 months. I asked him, casually, about the previous technicians who'd serviced the shelter. He said the trust's records were spotty, the files went back decades but weren't always complete. He said he'd inherited the account and didn't know much about the history. I asked him if Margaret Prohl was a relative. The line was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "My grandmother. She disappeared in 1979. The family never found out what happened to her." "She didn't disappear," I said. "She went to the branch shelter to service the generators. She stayed." Another long silence. Then, "That doesn't surprise me as much as it should." I asked him if he'd ever been down there himself. He said yes, once, for an inspection. He said he hadn't stayed long. He said it felt too good and that frightened him. He said he'd sent other people for inspections after that. He asked me if I was okay. I told him I was fine. This morning I checked my GPS history. I do this every day now. I checked to make sure I didn't drive to Ellsworth County in the night, the way you check to make sure you locked the door or turned off the stove, not because you think you forgot, but because the consequence of forgetting is too large to leave to memory. Today the GPS was clean. 14 days clean. But today's also the day I stopped pretending. Here's what I know. The branch shelter is an instrument designed by a man who understood that the human body is not loyal to the human mind. Gerhard Brandt lost his family. I don't know the details, but I know the architecture of his solution. He built a place that speaks directly to the nervous system, bypasses cognition entirely, and offers the body something the surface world cannot, a managed, optimized, frictionless environment where every variable has been solved. Temperature, air quality, sound, light, all of it calibrated to produce a state of deep physiological contentment. He didn't build a cage. He built a better room. And the horror of a better room is that you can't argue with it. You can't reason your way out of it, because reason isn't what's keeping you. What's keeping you is 10,000 years of evolutionary hardware that was built for a world of threats and scarcity, suddenly finding a place with no threats and no scarcity, and deciding, below the level of language, below the level of thought, that leaving would be insane. I know all of this. I've said it out loud. I've written it down. I understand the mechanism. I understand that what I'm feeling is a conditioned physiological response to infrasound exposure, and that with time and distance it will fade. I know this the way I know how a diesel engine works, completely, technically, with full confidence in the engineering. And I'm going back tomorrow. Not because I'm being called. Not because I hear anything in the dark. Not because an entity or a presence or a force is pulling me. I'm going back because I slept 7 hours in that place without dreaming of Karen's car pulling out of the driveway, and I have not slept 7 hours since, and my body knows the difference even if my mind has decided it doesn't count. I've packed my tools. I've loaded the truck. I've written a letter to Emma that I'll mail in the morning, not a goodbye, just a letter. I told her I'm taking a maintenance contract in rural Kansas, long-term, hard to reach by phone but I'll write when I can. I told her I love her. I told her I'm sorry that the world up here isn't quite enough for me, without explaining what that means. Travis was right. You can't call it a trap when the door is unlocked and the stairs go both ways. You can only call it what it is, a choice made by the body that the mind is too slow to overrule. It's 4 a.m. The motel heater clicks on and off in a cycle that has no rhythm. The ice machine down the hall shudders every 20 minutes. A truck downshifts on I-70. The air in this room tastes like carpet and climate control and strangers, and somewhere under a wheat field in Ellsworth County, a set of generators is humming at a frequency that would put all of this to sleep. If anyone reads this and goes looking for me, I'll be on level 3 of the branch shelter. Don't come down to bring me back. Not because it's dangerous. Because you'll understand.